It's January 1778, 10 miles from Valley Forge. 29-year-old mother of three, Anna Stone, is riding a tired horse through the night. She has a secret message for General George Washington, and she's trying to save her husband and two brothers who are encamped with the Continental Army. Will she make it in time? What does the secret message say? We'll find out when we speak with Tracy Lawson, author of Answering Liberty's Call. It's the true story. Hi, Tracy.
Hi,
How are
I'm
you?
here.
It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
So my name is Melissa Jacobs. I am the senior editor of Mainline Today magazine and the host of Mainline Tonight. I am here on behalf of Valley Forge Park Alliance. I am very honored to host this amazing talk with Tracy Lawson. So Tracy is the author of Answering Liberty's Call. It is a work of historical fiction based on the legend of her 6 times great-grandmother and great-grandfather, Anna Stone and Benjamin Stone. So let's start where you start the book. The first chapter is called None of a Woman's Business. So before we talk about the amazing things that Anna did in her journey from Virginia to Valley Forge, let's back up a little bit. What was a woman's business in colonial America? What was her life before she started that ride from Virginia to Valley Forge?
A woman's business in colonial Virginia was to keep the home. She and her husband, under the laws of the time, coverture meant that a woman was covered by her husband. So I've got it covered in colonial times meant they were literally one person. When anything needed to be transacted, business, legal stuff, it was all the husband's responsibility. Any money she brought to the marriage, any dowry, inheritances, they were all under her husband's control, as were her children when they were born, under her husband's control, because she had very little rights of her own.
Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. Amy Johnson, who is an amazing woman, she is in charge of Valley Forge Park Alliance. She thought this would be a great book to talk about because March is Women's History Month. I say every month is Women's History Month because we never forget. But nonetheless, we want to talk about women's place in colonial America, and certainly your 6 times great-grandmother's amazing story. So this is a personal story for you. You heard this legend sort of growing up. Tell us a little bit about your knowledge of this story before you started writing the book.
Okay, great. Now, lots of people, Anna and Benjamin had 11 children, so of course the story has spread all across the country and come down through the generations. I was not one of those kids who grew up hearing it at my grandpa's knee. I discovered the story in 2013 when I was compiling a 50th anniversary booklet for my mom and dad's anniversary. And I wanted to do a genealogy on both sides and include fun stories that I found. And when I discovered the story, I thought, oh, it's so wonderful, a woman patriot. You know, a woman who really did something amazing. So I included the story in the booklet. I was working on a different book series at the time, and as soon as I wrapped that, I decided I was going to write a story about Anna.
That's fantastic. Now we should talk about your 6 times great-grandfather also, Benjamin Stone. Yes. So he was a Baptist preacher, but he was a renegade. He was a little bit of a bad boy, I think. So tell us about Benjamin Stone.
I love writing him as the nerdy academic who's also a bad boy, you know, because at the time, we think of coming to America to get religious freedom. That's what we were taught in school, right? Is that people came to America to gain religious freedom. But the level of religious freedom you could gain varied from colony to colony. And, you know, in Pennsylvania, they had toleration. In Maryland, the Catholics and the Protestants existed peacefully side by side. But in Virginia, it was the Church of England. And the Church of England ruled with an iron hand, and the landed gentry all belonged to the Church of England. So it was the poorer people, the whites that were below the slave-owning class, that were largely the Baptists. And so Benjamin would have grown up in the Baptist church, and he, and before the Revolution, he took part in a movement to gain religious freedom in exchange for, you know, to raise troops in exchange for religious freedom when the war was over. And these
He was
steps
an abolitionist as well,
yes,
you
and he
told
was
me.
an abolitionist as well. It was so cool to find that out that in the 1760s, he was an abolitionist.
But that was not an easy life.
Oh,
It was
no.
not easy to, yeah, I mean, he was certainly in the minority.
Oh,
So
I
what
would
did you
say,
learn about his life before he left for the Continental Army?
yeah. So his life as a young Baptist preacher, he would have been subject to abuses. A lot of his fellow Baptist preachers were jailed for preaching schismatic doctrines and disturbing the peace. They would get arrested in their fields while they were working on their farms and just put in jail for no reason. Refused to call the case, that kind of thing. And it was not unusual for them to arrive at church on a Sunday morning and find that somebody had broken into the church building and destroyed the inside.
Because there was no protection. There was
Right. There
no,
was no
this is
protection. And there was no,
before, right,
yeah.
the Bill
Oh
of
no,
Rights
they were,
before. Yeah.
yeah, the landed gentry wanted them out. And the other thing too was that a marriage performed by anyone other than an Anglican priest in Virginia was not recorded in the county courthouse. So
Hmm.
all of y'all genealogists in Virginia, if you can't find a marriage record for your, people that you're searching for in the days before the American Revolution, it's likely that they were married by a Presbyterian or a Baptist minister, and it just simply wasn't recorded in any of the records.
It's fascinating. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're just joining us, my name is Melissa Jacobs. I am here on behalf of Valley Forge Park Alliance. I'm talking with Tracy Lawson. She is the author of this amazing book, Answering Liberty's Call. It is a work of historical fiction, but it is based on the legend of her 6 times great grandparents, Anna and Benjamin Stone. So let's fast forward. Benjamin, your 6 times great grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
and Anna's 2 brothers end up with the Continental Army in camp with General Washington at Valley Forge, which is far from you. You're in Texas, but it's very close to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm at Valley Forge all the time. It's one of my favorite places to go, one of my favorite national parks. So it's beautiful now, but back in 1778,
Oh my
it was
goodness.
not a fun place to be. Conditions were terrible. Tell us what
Conditions
you
were
learned
terrible.
about the winter encampment.
Well, when they arrived, the first thing they had to do was build shelter. So, right away, 2,000 huts for 12,000 men, 400 camp followers. And they say that Washington stayed in a tent until all the men's quarters were completed. He didn't move into his headquarters residence because he was there in solidarity with the men that were supporting his efforts and mutually supporting one another. But yes, it would have been awful if you've been to Valley Forge and you've seen the replica huts. There's certainly nothing
I
luxurious.
have. There's nothing to write home about, literally. I mean,
Oh my
it's
goodness.
very rudimentary housing to say the least.
Yes, and of
But
course
we
Anna's
talked
growing
about
up on the
other
mountain.
conditions
Oh,
there. There was disease was running rampant.
absolutely. Now, inoculation was not legal in some colonies, and so smallpox was always a concern. Especially in Virginia, there were no large cities to speak of. A lot of the men who enlisted had been on remote farms their entire lives, never been exposed to certain diseases, and then they enlist, they go to the army camp, and they were getting sick in droves, and many were dying. And so Washington had to wait for dispensation from the different states' governors to inoculate the troops, and even then, they're inoculating with live virus, so the risk is high.
Right. And you
Yeah.
found a story about the smallpox, what we might call a little bit of a vaccine
Yeah.
now. Certainly we're in the middle of another pandemic. You found a story about Cotton Mathers, right?
Yes, I did. Yes, Cotton Mather, we may remember him from the Salem witchcraft trials, but in the early 1700s, he had a servant, an enslaved man from Africa who had had the treatment. He'd had the variolation, which is they would make a cut on your arm and rub a little bit of the goo from a pustule of somebody who was sick into the open wound and then let you get a little bit of the disease. And some people reacted terribly to this. Some people only got a few symptoms, but in the story, Anna is a healer. I gave her one of the few vocations available to people, and the person who trains her says, if you want to be a healer, you've got to have this treatment so you can go in among the sick and not worry about catching it yourself. So that's
Yeah.
part of the story too, and that she inoculates illegally whenever she gets the opportunity in Virginia because she believes it's better to take precautions.
Yeah. So that's certainly something that resonates with today.
Oh yeah.
But let's talk about what Anna's motivation is to get on a horse in
Right.
Virginia, leave her children, and travel by herself, which was not a safe thing for a woman to do back then.
No.
Tell us what her mission was when she left
Okay.
Virginia.
Okay, so I'll give you the back of the book synopsis is that when the war, during Valley Forge, it's a, war is men's business, but that doesn't stop Anna from getting involved, because when she hears about what's going on at Valley Forge, she's not content to sit and wait. She packs what she can carry, medicine, warm clothes, food, and strikes out alone over 200 miles of rough roads to bring supplies to her husband and brothers there. Now she gets to York, Pennsylvania, which is also close to your stomping grounds, and that's where the Continental Congress is massed for the winter, because they've been ousted from Philadelphia and the British occupy that city. So they're hanging out there, and she comes into town. She meets a congressman who says, "I have a secret message that must get to General Washington about a conspiracy against him. Oh, no one will suspect a woman courier. Will you take the message?" And of course, because she's patriotic, and she, in the story, I have her see the big picture too. Gosh, what if, so they bring in someone else to take over for Washington and the men mutiny? And what if the soldiers in Philadelphia are waiting? What if the British know and they're waiting for the disorder to happen in the army camp so they can swoop in? And she's like, they might all die anyway. So now
And
the
also,
emergency is like huge.
one of the reasons that they maybe want to replace Washington is with a general who will surrender.
Absolutely, because in Philadelphia, the businessmen, the Quaker businessmen who are neutral, a lot of the times they're talking to General Howe, who's in Philadelphia, and he's like, there might be a way we could get business going again for you guys. And of
Right.
course, the price is a return to crown rule. And if we
Right.
put somebody in place who will say, "Oh, all is forgiven, you can be a colony again," and then everything would be fine, sure, except we'll execute all the traitors, but we're not going to tell you that up front, right? So there's the
Right.
danger. And replacing him with somebody who is willing to surrender, who maybe never thought we could win the war in the first place, that's very
Right.
dangerous.
But Anna has another motivation aside from wanting to save her country. She wants
Yes.
to save her children because if Benjamin Stone, her husband and your 6 times great-grandfather, if he dies, of course it would be a tragedy for her. But tell us what it would mean legally at the time.
Legally, her children would become orphans. Even though she was still there and still able to be their mother, he was not a man of means. And so if he died without the means to support her, the courts would immediately step in and say, your children are orphans, you've got to go to orphans court, and we're going to appoint a guardian. Now, this guardian could be anyone appointed by the court. And the guardian,
but a man.
but definitely a man. Yes. Now, if she had enough money, if she had enough inheritance to keep her house, she could keep her children. But someone like Anna, who, her husband's a preacher. In the country churches, the annual tithe was maybe a quarter. So he did not make a whole lot of money. And it was likely that her children would be taken from her and put into indentures or apprenticeships as soon as they were old enough, because the chief concern, it sounds so cruel, but the chief concern of these small towns was to keep the children from becoming a public charge, because caring for the indigent was a huge drain on small communities, and they just couldn't support it with taxes, especially during wartime. So it was, and of course these laws were on the books well into the 1800s, and even in the mid to late 1800s, a woman who divorced could, run the risk of losing her children because she couldn't support them. So
So the women basically did not have, so women did not have rights to their own children in colonial America. So if Benjamin Stone had died, Anna would lose pretty much everything she has and her 3 children. So she gets on this course and she undertakes this journey. So she changes her appearance just a little bit. Tell us about that.
Okay, so Anna starts off thinking, I've got this under control. I'm a healer. I ride all over the county. She's tough enough to handle it. But then she finds she's in over her head literally all the time, and bad things happen to her along the way. But she gains some skills. And one of the things she realizes is that a woman traveling alone is considered a prostitute. And so it's really hard. I mean, they didn't have McDonald's. You had to stop in at a tavern, and you had no idea what you were going to find in there. And so, she might be accosted or assaulted on the road, and she really didn't have any legal recourse. We worry about that kind of thing even to this day, but it was so dangerous for a woman alone. And so all those nice warm
And
clothes
also,
that
I think the other great thing about your book is that you really paint the image of what like these dark roads and woods, and it was really there was no like
oh
I-95. There
no.
was nothing. It was all, but like when you write about Chester County and roads that I know because I live here, it was treacherous terrain, and there were Hessians all over the place. And really a lot of danger for a woman to be traveling alone. So many
Mhm.
women now, my friends and I, we go hike all the time in Valley Forge.
Mhm.
And after I read your book, it really made me pause for a second,
Yeah.
and think about how lucky I am that I get to do that and that I feel safe enough to do that with my friends, to enjoy Valley Forge Park, and all that it has to offer. So I was thinking about Anna and her ride there, and we don't want to spoil the end of it. We want
Oh no
everybody
no.
to go buy this book, Answering Liberty's Call. But just to give us a little bit of an overview of the research that you did, because
Mhm.
this was a genealogy project for you as well. So what
Yeah.
kind of tools did you use to do that?
Well, I'm a 30-year member of the DAR, so I learned how to do this kind of research before we had the internet. But we're so lucky now because so many books have been digitized, so many records are available online, and ancestry.com is a great place to start. Now you have to, you have to do your due diligence, and you have to back it up and find all the stuff. And if you're looking to join a lineage society, they can help you with that. But I started there, and that was where I learned the facts, especially the fact that her father had died. And when I learned the laws pertaining to women, I knew that Anna was an orphan when she was a girl. And of course, that's going to motivate her, not my kids. I might have suffered through that, but I'm not going to let that happen to my own children. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, then I found the story of of her husband, why he didn't own slaves, and it was because his grandfather, his grandfather's mother died giving birth to him, and so the little boy was raised by an enslaved woman who was his nanny. And when he was old enough to realize what it meant for her to be enslaved, he vowed he would never own another human. And so
Yeah.
that was passed down through the family. And Benjamin makes a big point of that when he's talking about wanting to marry Anna, because she says, the moment I marry you, I give up what little freedom I have. And I'm going to have to bend to your will. And the things that I want to accomplish and the things that I want to do, I'll have to put on hold because you'll tell me to. And he says, why would I do that to you? The woman that I
I
would
love
marry
that
over
part.
anybody else. I know. And so I wanted to make him as progressive enough. I wanted him to be swoon worthy. I wanted us to all enjoy
I
reading
mean,
about him, right?
yeah. Listen, he's a man working on a horse and riding from
That's,
Virginia to Pennsylvania.
thank you. That's what I was hoping to put him as.
Absolutely. It's like a love story, an adventure story. It's a patriotic story. And if people are looking to research their own heritage, of course, the DA, or the Daughters of American Revolution,
Yes.
is one of these. Valley Forge also has a ton of resources. They have the muster rolls, from the Continental Army, and a ton of other resources. If you think that your ancestors, fought with General Washington or were encamped there, you can contact Valley Forge and they will help you find all of that history. And Tracy, I am so glad that you found your history. This is where everybody can get the book, Tracy Lawson. Oops, here it is. TracyLawsonBooks.com. It's
Mhm.
on Amazon. It's at all major book retailers. Please go buy this book and support this author, support this story, The Legend of Anna Stone. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me, and I want to
Thank you,
thank Valley
Melissa.
Forge Park Alliance for hosting both of us. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Bye bye.
Bye.